Okay, take one of intro. So this was my first build. Because it was our first attempt and no one else had done this before that I worked with, there were a lot of things that we did well and a lot of things that we didn't do so well. And after 2 years of living in this thing, I think it's time that I show you all the stuff that I'd like to change within this van. I'm Ben, and this is DogCatManVan. Okay, so one of the main things that has been on my mind when it comes to the van is how much it weighs. We did not use the lightest materials in the world to build everything out in this van. So right now I have some scraps loaded up in the back. I just replaced the front struts and the rear rotors and calipers, and I'm gonna take those parts to the scrap yard, and I'm hoping I can weigh my van going in and then weigh it coming out and find out how much this thing weighs. 8,620 pounds. Okay. All right, well, that was it. I just threw a bunch of shit into a pile. $8,480 pounds. That's with my water tank full right now. Okay, back. Well, grocery shopping and then back and figuring out the numbers. I'm back from the scrapyard and I looked up what the curb weight of this van is, then the max payload of the van, and put it up against what it actually weighs. The curb weight is 4,889 pounds. The max payload with this van, and it's a gas vehicle, is 4,010 pounds. Then my total weight came in with like all my stuff and the pets in here was 8,480 pounds. So I'm roughly 400 pounds under the max. That means when we go on these trips and there's 2 other guys in here with their stuff, we're overweight. So I need to put this van on a diet. There's a giant plane right above us, so let's give it a second. One of the ways I'm gonna drop the weight in this van is by removing this inch-thick tongue and groove pine board that I have on all my doors and the majority of my walls. I think I'm gonna either replace it with a thinner tongue and groove board, a Luan plywood, or some type of composite material. So while I have the paneling off, I've been playing around with the idea of putting a window here. Initially, I didn't put a window there because I wanted the van to be stealthy. But now that I have a side ladder, solar panels, a rear mounted tire, I'm pretty sure people who see this van know it's a camper van. The other thing is when we're on trips and I have passengers back here, a lot of times while we're up here pointing things out, they can't see anything that's going on. So having a window there would give them a little visibility while we're driving. Plus, it adds more light in here, and it might make the space feel a bit more open. I also thought while the back panels are off the doors in the bedroom area, I can add those portholes, but maybe that's too much. I don't know. I'm still debating on that. Okay, so the next thing I would do to remove some of the weight in this van is get rid of these sheet metal walls. The plan was to have galvanized steel so I wouldn't have to really mess with the rust. We ended up with the wrong sheet metal. I'm sure I'm gonna get some shit online for this. Like, we had to go with it. There was a time constraint. We couldn't return them. We just had to go with what our friend bought for us. I'm talking too much about this. So if I do remove this sheet metal stuff, it's like killing 4 birds with 1 stone. The first thing is that they weigh too much. I need to replace them with some type of acrylic or waterproof material to lighten the load. And 2, I'm constantly battling the rust. So every time I shower, I have to wipe down the walls, make sure there's no moisture anywhere so that it doesn't start to spot up with rust. 3, I need to redo my whole mixer setup because one winter, my lines froze up, an icicle popped out of the shower head, and it kind of ruined all of the shutoff valves. And the 4th thing is I need to get access behind this wall. And the reason for that is because of this dent. 2 winters ago, my buddy Nick put this dent in the van. He turned too sharp at a gas station pump and hit one of the barriers. And I've taken it in, and when they look at it, they don't want to touch it because of liability reasons. They're afraid if they tack weld it on a rod to hammer out the dent, that they might light the insulation on the other side of the wall on fire. So without being able to see the other side of the wall, they won't touch it. So I need to open that wall to get this dent out. Look at this. See that purple? He rolled on a blueberry and that's been there for a week now. And speaking of insulation, there's a couple areas within the van that I would like to add insulation to. And one of those is my fresh water tank. When it hits the teens and lower, my water lines and my fresh water tank start to freeze up. And so I'd like to open this up, add some wool insulation around it, and also while the walls are open, I can insulate my fresh water lines to the shower and the sink. So the other part of all of this is my gray water. Now, all of that is located outside of the van underneath. I have two lines coming from the inside of the van out, one from the shower and one from the sink. They run down and meet at a 13-gallon gray water holding tank. And from there, I have like a 6-foot run that runs all the way back to this drainage port I have on the back of the van. That's a lot of areas where the gray water can freeze up. And when it hits the teens, I don't think there's a lot of things I can do to insulate it to stop it from freezing. So my idea is to add 3-way valves to both the sink and the shower lines right as they come out of the van. So I can drain to the ground rather than going to the holding tank. Now I know that's not ideal, but I use non-toxic soaps. I'm almost always parked in a buddy's driveway. And if I do go to like a park or a public place, I can always turn the valve back to sending the water into the holding tank. But during the winter, it's no fun when your gray water freezes up and then you have stagnant water sitting in your shower and your sink. I also think I'd like to shorten my drainage line for the gray water. 6 feet is a big run. If I can make it so that instead of going to the back here, have it instead run to the side of the van where I have all my fill areas at, that would make it a much shorter space for it to freeze up on me. There is the issue of trying to get around the exhaust, but I think there's a way that I can make that work. And I know there's those heating wires that you can get to put in your lines to keep things from freezing, and there's heating pads, which I have. But those draw quite a bit of energy, and it's one of the reasons why I ended up ruining my batteries, which brings me to the next thing I'd like to fix on the van. So my batteries are located right here. Now, 2 winters ago, I had fallen asleep while running those heat pads on my water tanks, and they drained my batteries dangerously low. So low that I had to get a battery tender to get them back up to a level that I can plug them in to charge them. And when I did that, I basically kinked the armor of them. So they've never been able to hold the charge that they used to, and over the course of a year and a half, they can't really hold the charge anymore. I mean, batteries don't last forever, but I definitely killed them a lot quicker than I should have. And I'm gonna replace them with what I have already, which is 2 200 amp hour AGM deep cycle batteries. And that's because that's all I can really afford right now. If I could afford to get lithium ion batteries, I would do it. And I would recommend you to do it as well if you can afford it. They last longer, they're lighter, and they're smaller, but they're much pricier. And while we're back here, another thing that I was gonna do to hopefully reduce some of the weight of the van would be to rework my bed frame. Initially, we did this because aesthetically, I wanted to have paneling underneath here and mount lights to it, but it ended up being pretty heavy. And when I did my build video, everyone was freaking out that I didn't put any ventilation holes in there in fear that I was getting mold on my bed. I don't have that yet, but in case I don't change this out, I'm at least going to bore some ventilation holes within it. But I think if I do remove this, I'm just gonna replace it with some slats, because that'll greatly reduce the weight of it. Tire. So the tire swing has always kind of been something that I've been frustrated with. I like the arm it's on and where it's located, but the way it attaches to the van is not the best thing ever. We kind of just improvised with it. This latch is a little thing, I don't even know how to explain it, honestly. This goes over the arm of the tire, and then you pull it down and we push a lock on there. And it's a whole process. So what I'd really like to do is find like a spring-loaded pin that I can just pull up to release the arm. And then when I want to lock it back down, I just The other thing is the tire swing is kind of right in the location where we put my propane remote fill. And so I'd like to relocate this and put it on the side of the van where I fill everything else up at. Right around here. Yeah. And finally, we have the AC unit, which I've talked about a ton of times, and it just didn't work for me. And I know this is a bad location. What I should have done is ventilated it up and through the van so that the cold air could have drifted down and cooled off the entire area. I did fashion up some ductwork to it and ventilate it up to the ceiling during the summer, and it did kind of work, but it would really only bring it down to like 75 in here if we were lucky in the shade during the heat of the summer. What I would really need to do is take this, build some type of contraption around it, send it back through the walls, and then up and ventilate it out through the ceiling. And I just don't have the time to fuss with it. I'm gonna remove this whole thing, plug up the holes, and do something else. And what I think I'm gonna do is just go and spend the money on a roof unit and take out one of my fans and flop it in its place. I've thought about maybe doing a portable unit, but I don't really have the space for it. There's a way that you can turn this into a mini split, but is it gonna work if I mount it to the bottom and during the winter a bunch of snow clogs up there and I hit a rock or something happens and then it falls off? Is there a way to get a real good split unit and then mount it on the back and get it ventilated through here? I don't know. I'm just gonna get rid of this. I'm gonna buy a ceiling unit, install it, and be done with it. Because at the end of the day, I just want an AC unit that works. Because it's important to have a cooled off area when you have pets in the middle of the summer. And another issue that I kind of had was the condensation that came from this thing. I'm not always parked on a level surface. And so I did make it so that the back would drain out the bottom of the van, but when I'm leaned this way, it would leak out the front, and over time, it started to seep to my floor, which then ruined my bamboo flooring. So, while I'm getting rid of this and kind of reworking this kitchenette, I'm gonna remove my flooring and replace it with something a little bit darker. And I think that covers almost everything. I mean, I gotta touch up some paint throughout the van. I'd like to redo my blackouts, and I might just go with plain Reflectix. And I'll probably relocate a few switches to make them easier to get to. And I know it sounds like there's a lot of things that I'm gonna have to fix in here, but after living in this thing full-time for 2 years and going on countless trips with tons of people back here and dogs and a cat, I think it held up really well for a first go. And if there's any advice I could give to somebody who'd want to do something like this, I guess it would be feel free to do as much research as you'd like, but at a certain point, you're gonna need to stop and actually move forward with something. Because there's tons of opinions out there and videos and forums and people sharing what they think you should do, and a lot of it contradicts itself, and it'll end up keeping you from actually doing anything at all. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. It's gonna happen. And you can almost always fix those mistakes. And if building it isn't your thing, that's fine. You know, if you want to just see what it's like, go find a cheap RV or go find one of these that have already been built out. There's plenty of them out there. And I feel like a lot of people go into this thinking like, I want to live a stress-free lifestyle. Well, this isn't going to do that for you. Just like everything in life, it brings along responsibility and the stress that comes along with it. If that's something you're looking for, maybe you need to figure yourself out. If you're looking for something that's gonna fix your issues, this probably isn't going to be the thing. But it might give you the opportunity to learn about yourself, figure out what you do and you don't care about. Because at the end of the day, I think that's what really matters most. All right, that's it. That's the end of the video. I hope this helped you guys out, at least shed some light on a few things. You know, you can learn from my mistakes and hopefully not do them yourselves. And maybe it was a little more for me because I am curious to hear your guys' opinions on the different things that I want to fix in here. But thank you for watching, and if you want to support the channel, make sure to hop on Patreon so I can continue making videos for everything, or buy some merchandise if you want to. And if there's anything you guys would like me to cover, leave it in the comments and I can probably do it. But now it's time for me to start making some changes within here. Yes, okay. I'm gonna point to something.
All right, sure. He looks mad. Archer.
It's kind of his thing. Stop.
He's so fat.
Okay.